good friend of mine, Randy Benson. And before we go into this presentation, I want to ask a question. How many of you have seen a JFK-related film called The Searchers? I see a number of hands out there, and I see a number that have not. Randy Benson was the producer, director, and editor of The Searchers, which premiered in Dallas, Texas at the Texas Theater on November 21st, 2017, I believe it was. And it was an amazing, or is an amazing work, and it cataloged and detailed the lives of a number of JFK assassination researchers. And it's an amazing work. And Randy is a filmmaker. And let me get my glasses out so I can give him the due credit he deserves on some of the awards he has received.
Is that available on Netflix, The Searchers?
Amazon.
The question was, is The Searchers available on Netflix? And it's not. Evidently, it is on Amazon. And
Vimeo.
And Vimeo. All right, Randy's work has garnered numerous awards, most notably the Academy Award for Best Student Documentary at the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts, and Sciences Academy Awards. Benson has received an Eastman Kodak Excellence in Filmmaking Award at the Cannes Film Festival and a First Appearance Award at the International Documentary Film Festival in Amsterdam. His presentation, actually before we go into that, he's been an integral part of the JFK Assassination Conference for the last number of years. And he's such an important part of these conferences, and I'm glad he's here. His presentation this morning is MLK 101. Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Randy Benson.
Well, it's great to be here with you, and it's wonderful to see so many friends in the audience today. So this presentation is something I do for people who know nothing about any assassination. So I kind of see myself as almost a gateway to help people learn that there's more to the stories, to the JFK story, to the Malcolm X story, to the RFK story, to the MLK story. And so I've put together a number of presentations for each assassination, and I've been giving them at libraries and Elks Club and Rotary Clubs and Garden Society, and anyone who will have me, I give this. And so today, most of you know everything about this, but hopefully there are some people who yeah, we all can learn something, right? Okay, so without further ado, let's go. MLK 101, the assassination of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., what we know and why it matters. So I'll just blow by this. I'm Randy Benson. If any of you want to get in touch with me, you can find me at my film's website, thesearchersfilm.com, all my contact info. So please don't hesitate to get in touch if you like. Okay, let's start with the official story. A simple tale. Once upon a time, there was a young pastor, and he invigorated society, and he fought for social justice and civil rights. He was a leader in the civil rights movement and galvanized people of all races and creeds to fight for civil rights. He won the Nobel Prize because of this work, and he was heralded around the world. And in 1963, he gave the famous I Have a Dream speech on the Washington Mall, right by the reflecting pool. Everyone knows about it. I have a dream. I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. On April 4th, 68, he was killed in Memphis. The official story is that he was killed by a racist escaped convict, James Earl Ray, who pled guilty. There was no trial. Now, the real story And the great John Judge would say, contemporary official society, they have paradigms for all the big events, the deep political events in our country. But John Judge said, but there are other paradigms out there. King was seen as a threat. J. Edgar Hoover saw him as a threat to our society, to what he saw as traditional American values. Here's an FBI document, and you can see security matter, Martin Luther King Jr., communist. Another one, we know that Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King represents a very real security problem to this country. Another communist labeling from FBI documents. And here's just a little morsel of all of the wiretaps and surveillance the FBI was conducting on King. Microphone, wiretap, all over the country. Then he organized in 1968 along with the SPLC, right? Sorry? Yeah, SCLC, thank you. The Poor People's Campaign. And the campaign demanded economic and human rights for poor Americans of diverse backgrounds. And again, this was very threatening to the powers that be, especially J. Edgar Hoover. Then King learned about Vietnam. He knew about it, but he really didn't have a deep understanding of what was happening. Until William Pepper, the great lawyer and friend of Dr. King, gave him a copy of Ramparts magazine, the January 1967 issue, The Children of Vietnam. Shared by Pepper to King, the two formed a friendship in the struggle for social justice. I would show you some of the images, but I think I'll let you look them up for yourself. They're horrific images of children who have been ravaged by war. Upon seeing the images of the brutality in Vietnam, King knew he had to adjust his focus.
And I think the time has come now for our leaders to say that we've made a grave mistake in Vietnam and we ought to take the initiative in bringing an end to this conflict.
Grave mistake getting in Vietnam. And that was his first step into a full Vietnam, going after the Vietnam War fully and the president.
I think the time.
So, a year to the day before King was assassinated, on April 4th, 1967, at the Riverside Church in New York City, he gave his address, very famous address, called Beyond Vietnam.
A true revolution of values will lay hand on the world order and say of war, this way of sudden indifference is not just. This business of burning human beings with napalm, a nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military expense than on programs of social uplift, is approaching spiritual death.
He equated the military-industrial complex to a spiritual death of the American soul.
And I knew that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government.
People say in the JFK assassination that the American University speech on June 10th, 63, was most likely the nail in the coffin of JFK. Many MLK researchers think that statement was the nail in his coffin. So, the setup. The trip to Memphis in early April 68. He was scheduled to be at the Holiday Inn, and Hoover was furious. This is a crazy document. FBI memo, March 29, 68, quote, from J. Edgar Hoover, "There is a first-class Negro hotel in Memphis, the Hotel Lorraine, but King chose to hide out at the white-owned and operated Holiday Inn Motel." They changed the hotel. King wasn't involved in that decision. And I say, why the Lorraine? And I'm not familiar with that. I hope that some light can be shed on that fact this weekend. He was placed in the second floor balcony area facing Mulberry Street, right? Facing Mulberry Street. Instead of on the inside courtyard on the first floor where he was originally planning to stay. However, he was moved upstairs, and there's a question mark there. Later, we find out that he's surrounded by intelligence officers, intelligence agents, and FBI informants. On Thursday, April 4, 68, at 6:05 p.m., shots rang out from across Mulberry Street, and Martin Luther King was killed. James Earl Ray, the patsy. The official story, we know that he was claimed to be a racist and everything else, but he was a petty criminal. He had no history of racism. He escaped easily from a Missouri jail, and he traveled to Toronto. Toronto, where Ray met a mysterious figure named Raoul. Raoul convinced Ray to travel to Memphis and get a room at Bessie Brewer's rooming house, whose windows looked across Mulberry Street from the Lorraine Hotel. And you can see on the right-hand side under the sign Wink, the apartment rooms. And in the foreground, Jim's Grill, which we'll talk about in a second. So this is the scene. Don't think you can see my mouse, but on the bottom of Mulberry Street, you see that thing that looks like a reverse Oklahoma, and that's the brush on the hill, which I've dubbed the brushy knoll. And behind it, you see the rooming house. This is the view from Lorraine's second floor balcony of the rear of the boarding house in 68. You can see the rooming house up top and the brush. These are views of the rooming house bathroom from which it's said that Ray fired the shots that killed King. And you can see in this next shot an attempted recreation of Ray's supposed shooting position. To get that shot, you have to stand on the claw leg bathtub and crouch down to make it work. Highly implausible. The official story states that Ray ran down the steps of the boarding house, then dropped a rifle wrapped in cloth in the doorway of the Caneep Amusement Company, jumped in his white Mustang, and drove away. The alleged rifle, a Remington Model 760 pump-action .30-06 fitted with a marksman scope. Ray's fingerprints were found on the rifle. However, his fingerprints were not found on the shell casings. Also, there was no clip in the rifle. And no paraffin test or nitrate test was performed on Ray. Witnesses said that they saw shots and rifle smoke come not from the rooming house window, but from the brushy knoll. This is a view from the second floor balcony again. This is a view of the brushy knoll and the rooming house from room 306, where King was staying. This is a view of the Lorraine from the brushy knoll. Within days, the brush was cleared from the hill, thus destroying the crime scene. On June 8th, Scotland Yard investigators arrested Ray at a London airport. Ray was trying to fly to Belgium with the eventual goal he later admitted of reaching Rhodesia. The so-called guilty plea. On the advice of his corrupt and inept lawyer, Percy Foreman, Ray accepted a guilty plea in order to avoid the death penalty. He immediately regretted it and attempted to change his plea with the hopes of a jury trial. His request was denied. In October '74, James Earl Ray again attempted to recant his confessions for the murder of King. Aggie Kennedy, who traveled to Memphis to cover the hearing, drew Ray as he attempted to argue that he was not well served by his previous attorney, Foreman. I just think that I was just in D.C., and that drawing is in the Library of Congress. So, a new investigation from 1976 to 78, the House Select Committee on Assassinations. Every JFK researcher known to humankind knows a lot about the HSCA. The House Select Committee on Assassinations Conspiracy.
Good evening. A congressional committee has concluded that President John Kennedy and civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr., both of them, were probably killed as the result of conspiracies. The House Assassinations Committee wound up its 2-year study by recommending that the Justice Department look into both cases.
A side note, that's Jessica Savage, who, after reporting on the HSCA, chose behind the scenes to reopen an investigation on her own with elite investigators of the JFK assassination. She lasted a couple years and was found, I believe, in Pennsylvania in a canal, her car upside down. Lloyd Jowers. The case gets more complicated. In 1993, Lloyd Jowers appeared on the ABC News program Primetime Live. He claimed that he was paid $100,000 by alleged Memphis mobster Frank Liberto to help organize the assassination. Jowers owned a diner, Jim's Grill. It's next to the rooming house and 2 doors down from Kniep's, directly neighboring the rooming house from which King was allegedly shot by Ray. Jowers had remained silent for 25 years after King's assassination. However, after watching Ray's HBO mock trial, Jowers produced his confession and claimed that he was part of a larger conspiracy to assassinate King and frame Ray as a patsy. He also claimed that Raul, Memphis police officers, and the mafia had been involved. Jowers named Memphis Police Lieutenant Earl Clark as the shooter. Dexter King meets a dying Ray. Dexter King, quote, "Did you kill my father?" James Earl Ray, no, I didn't. Dexter King, well, as awkward as this may seem, I want you to know that I believe you and my family believes you. and we are going to do everything in our power to try and make sure that justice will prevail. Ray was later died before he could see justice. In 1998, the Martin Luther King family files suit. And you see Coretta Scott King and the family are the plaintiffs versus Lloyd Jowers and other unknown co-conspirators in the Supreme Court of Tennessee, Jackson. During the 4-week trial, the great attorney William Pepper, representing the King family, brought forward over 70 witnesses and thousands of documents. The jury that heard the case took only 1 hour of deliberations to reach a unanimous verdict that King was assassinated as a result of conspiracy. They found Jowers responsible and also found governmental agencies were among the conspirators. The King family was granted the only $100 they requested in damages. The verdict.
A Memphis jury has found evidence of a conspiracy in the 1968 assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The King family won a wrongful death lawsuit yesterday against a retired Memphis restaurant owner who once claimed he paid someone other than James Earl Ray to kill the civil rights leader. The family hopes the verdict in the civil suit will lead to a new federal investigation into Dr. King's murder. NPR's Debbie Elliott reports.
During the civil trial, the family's attorney tried to show that the King assassination was the result of a vast conspiracy involving the government, the mafia, and the military. The case was built around 73-year-old Lloyd Jowers. He owned a small restaurant across the street from the Lorraine Motel.
Okay, we'll move on. That was NPR, National Public Radio. It's interesting to note that the verdict and the trial happened during Clinton's impeachment hearings. So the media was focused solely on that. If you remember, do you remember? Let's not remember. So where are we now? Well, we're together. That's one big step. We're working together, trying to find the truth, trying to hold people accountable, trying to educate the future generations. I teach at Davidson College outside of Charlotte. I've given my RFK talk to them. It was received very well. I have a very supportive dean who is interested in learning more about things she just doesn't know much about. That's unique in academia. It really is. I have 2 kids. I know many, if not most of you have kids. And it's critically important that we pass on not just the information that we've gained as a collective body, but also to encourage them to question, to ask questions, to be skeptical, to team up with other people. And finally, Dr. King.
In my mind, peace is much more important than faith. And I think there has to be a transformation here in terms of our thinking and in terms of peace. We've got to come to see now that peace must not only be a goal that we talk about and seek, but a means by which we arrive at that goal.
I love that quote. Peace is not just the goal, it's the way we arrive at that goal. So I want to thank you all for coming and being here together this weekend. I'm excited about all the other speakers being able to fill in everything they do. So thank you very much.
Randy, we have time for some questions.
Okay, sure.
Could you share with us the story about the presentation that you gave where you had 2 very interesting visitors?
Yes. Yeah, at my local library, the South Durham Regional Branch of the Durham County Public Library. They asked me, they saw my film, they bought a copy for the library, which was great, and they asked me to give a little JFK talk, JFK 101. So I was just going to use a small conference room of like 8 people. We just put chairs out. And when I got there that morning, they said, "This is crazy," and took me to the big room where they put up all the voting machines, right? The big voting room. There were over 100 people in that room. Just people. People who wanted to learn. They knew something was up, but didn't have the information to know. And they wanted to learn. I was blown away. So I started my JFK 101 with documents and videos and a massive amount of research by Robert Groden, of course, my research mentor, by the way. But then a couple minutes into it, 2 gentlemen walked in. This sounds crazy, but they were in black suits and in black ties. And they walked in and stood at the back of the room, just like this. After my presentation, and they kind of creeped me out. I kept looking at them. After my presentation, as I was wrapping up my computer and all the gear, they came up and said, "Hey, we really enjoyed your presentation. We're from the Office of General Counsel from the National Archives in College Park, Maryland, and we drove down for your talk." And I said, "Of course, well, can I buy you a beer? Because I really want to figure out why you drove all the way from D.C. to the South Regional Library in Durham, North Carolina, to see a little talk from someone like me." And they gave me their card, and I keep that card with me if I can find it in my wallet. FOIA and Privacy Act Officer, Office of General Counsel, National Archives and Records Administration. I keep that card in my wallet just to remind myself, and maybe remind other people, that even a schmuck like me in Durham, North Carolina, is being watched. So I can only imagine what, Robert, you've gone through, what Ed has gone through, everybody. Lisa, it's just Larry, so many of us. So, Gary, it's important that we work together and we stay vigilant.
I have a quick question.
Yeah, Lisa.
And this is such a great presentation. Have you tried to get this out to other teachers? To offer in their classrooms?
I have offered it. Most departments are really interested in it. Anthropology likes it, biology, the sciences like it. The history department is not interested.
Oh, that's so sad.
And these are tenure track professors.
Wow.
And you and
Aren't you working on a sequel to The Searchers?
I am secretly working on a sequel to The Searchers. There were so many people that I didn't get to interview, and questions I didn't get to ask other researchers. So, yes, I'm working on a sequel, and I'm working as fast as I can on it. It will not take me 14 years like the last one. I don't have that in me. Yes, sir.
In the photograph that you showed on the balcony with those people pointing for a change or you read or heard of any evidence that was a setup by one of the infiltrators that came up there, was kneeling, and told them to point that way because the shot came from that? Because
Yes, and his name was Merrill, and I can't remember his name.
Yeah.
See? We all learned something. Yes.
Okay.
Can you repeat the question?
What was the question?
The question was,
That particular picture led so many to believe that's where the shot came from for many, many years, and yet we now know that that was a setup. Those people pointing had no idea they were following the directions of that person, law enforcement or wherever he came from.
yeah, so in this, I'll repeat it. In this photo, we see everyone pointing up to the boarding house room, what appears to be the trajectory of the boarding house room. However, there was an intelligence officer or FBI informant who was kneeling with King right there, and he's the one who pointed up, and everyone else pointed up too. Yes, sir.
Yeah, a little bit of a correction here, and that is, the people are pointing where they're pointing, and the shot either came from the bathroom up on the second floor, or it came from the yard directly below it. So when those people are pointing, they're pointing in the direction of where the shot came from. They're not pointing out a particular window or that. So it really doesn't matter. They're just saying this is where the shot came from.
Yeah, that's a great clarification. And if you didn't hear that they're pointing in the direction of the shots. It doesn't matter if they're pointing up.
But
or
allegedly,
down.
Merrill McCullough was the first one to point. They kind of all followed in that direction, and that direction is upward, whereas King was shot from what appears to be a lower angle. He was moved up, hit on the right side of his face and neck.
The brushy knoll.
More likely from a place like the brushy knoll than the second floor window.
Yeah. Hanging out with John Judge in Washington, D.C. was a treat. And when we went he took me to the Reagan assassination site, attempted assassination site, and he called that little place above, the perfect place to shoot from, the bushy knoll. So I say we keep it going. I think we're good.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Oh, yes, sir. Up and down.
Just a tiny. When Hoover was going after Martin Luther King in kind of a vicious way, and there was all this thing, oh, he's a communist. I don't think Hoover was really that concerned with the communism. It was an excuse for him to be able to go and tap Martin Luther King in every place, hotel rooms and all this stuff. You don't chase communists by tapping hotel rooms. It was a way for him to get Bobby Kennedy to sign this agreement. And so it wasn't that Hoover was trying to protect the United States. He was trying to get Martin Luther King because he hated him.
Yes, yeah. But he also went after anyone who he deemed a threat. And
Sure,
he deemed King a triple threat.
But when he
Quadruple
got
threat.
those permissions, none of the reports that came from those places had anything to do with communism. They all had to do with his sex life.
Stanley Levinson was associated with the Communist Party,
Had been.
yeah, bottom line, that he had been. So that's why, too. He had some credibility in terms of going after King because of Levinson's past. But it wasn't legit on King's part.
Yes, sir.
I think that is, a lot of people reported that's why Bobby Kennedy signed the wiretap, because he was concerned about communist ties. And what he just said about Levinson, that, yeah. And Martin Luther King did have tendencies towards what I would call extreme socialism, but that still doesn't mean anything, because he was such a great leader, and the fact that he may have thinking initially that was a way of curing poor America should not be held against him. But the only reason Bobby Kennedy signed the wiretaps is because he feared he was truly a communist, which of course we know he wasn't.
No, that's not true, because Bobby talked about that, and the reason he approved the taps was to prove to Hoover that King was not a communist.
That's right, I'm sorry.
That's the reason. And he never approved the taps in the bedrooms, the hotel rooms. It was only his office.
Well,
And he bumbled it badly. Yeah, no worries.
The conversation will continue, folks. Thank you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Randy Benson. I really think it's important that we do these kind of primers, and that's what I would call that, to kind of refresh our memories on some of the things that we may have known at one time, but may be a little fuzzy about now. And start to look at the chronology. And I was going to share something that just before I came to the conference, I picked up William Pepper's book, Orders to Kill. And I didn't get nearly as far in it as I had hoped to. But I saw something that I don't remember having read before. But it really caught my attention, and I'm hoping that Ryan Jones will be able to elaborate on it more. But in the book, he was talking about where Martin Luther King had decided to join the anti-Vietnam War movement. And as he became more and more a public figure and capturing the attention of the American public, he was approached to run for president of the United States as a third-party candidate. And it was interesting to me in this chronology that 4 days before Martin Luther King was assassinated, Lyndon Baines Johnson made the announcement that he was not going to run for re-election. I haven't had the time to fully grasp the meaning of that or the potential of that, but I am hoping that you have. And I look forward to hearing more about it. And I'm really looking forward to going out to the Lorraine Motel and see the National Civil Rights Museum and having that private tour we're going to get. So those of us who are lucky, you'll definitely want to make avail of that opportunity because it's going to be special. Ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and take about a 10-minute break. We'll come back and we'll bring up Mal Hyman.